Welcome. I'm Lee Cowan, and this is Here Comes the Sun, a closer look at some of the people, places, and things we bring you every weekend on Sunday morning. He's gone from Billy on the street to Billy on the big screen. Our Jonathan Vigliotti met up with Billy Eichner to talk about his new movie.
I made a movie called Bros.
Eichner has co-written and stars in what's being billed as the first gay romantic comedy ever released by a major film studio, and also the first to feature an all-LGBTQ principal cast.
He told me he likes country music and his favorite singer is Garth Brooks. What kind of gay man says his favorite singer is Garth Brooks? That scares me.
The movie follows Eichner's character, Bobby, as he stumbles towards a relationship with love interest Aaron, played by Luke McFarlane.
Great, whatever, whenever.
Cool, whatever, whenever. GIF of Michael Scott dancing.
That's good. Office GIF? This person isn't gay.
More exclusive excerpts from their conversation are coming up a little later in the show.
At what moment in your real life did you learn it was time to come out, live my truth?
I had a very unusual upbringing in a great way. I grew up in New York City with very liberal parents. My parents at different times in their single lives had lived in the West Village in the 60s and 70s. Now, I'm not saying it was their dream to give birth to a gay child. I mean, I was born in 1978, this is not now,
Different time.
A different time. But they were so supportive and so encouraging. And I mean, I was obsessed with Madonna as a kid growing up in the 80s, as most gay boys were. And they took me to Madonna concerts and, so they were so supportive. And also, we would go to Broadway shows, right? I loved theater as a kid, as did my parents. And we would go to Broadway shows in the 80s and the early 90s, and I would look around and you would see gay men.
Then Conor Knighton has the story of a pesky pest that became the symbol of a southern town's tenacity.
I think it's kind of cool too because they ruined our crops, but it also makes us discover new things.
You hear that sentiment a lot in enterprise. It's not actually about the insect, it's about what it represents.
The lesson of the boll weevil is that when adversity comes your way, don't quit.
As we look at it now, it was just something that made us move in another direction in a better way.
Whether you're an accountant, firefighter, mechanic, teacher, whatever this is, we all have weevils in our own lives. But they make us stronger. It's like the souvenir t-shirt says, "Fear no weevil." Celebrate it.
That's all coming up right here on Here Comes the Sun. Billy Eichner has taken his bold brand of comedy into groundbreaking territory with his latest film, a rom-com like you've never seen before. Jonathan Vigliotti explains.
We are just going to be friends, okay?
Great, friends. It's the best thing.
We love romantic comedies.
It was a perfect blend of poetry and meanness.
Meanness. Let me tell you something about meanness.
Don't misunderstand me. I'm just trying to pay you a compliment.
The chance meetings.
What's your name, young man?
My name is Winston. Winston Shakespeare.
And of course, the against all odds happy endings.
So what happened after? He climbed up the tower and rescued her.
She rescues him right back.
Comedian and actor Billy Eichner loves rom-coms, but he has one complaint.
And they never made one about a gay couple. We weren't in those movies at all. We weren't even the best friend at that point. We just were nowhere to be found.
Eichner thinks it's time for a change.
Hey. Hey, what's up?
I tried to kiss you and you didn't kiss me back is what's up.
I'm sorry, I'm shy.
With director, co-writer Nicholas Stoller and producer Judd Apatow, no strangers to rom-coms themselves,
I made a movie called Bros.
Eichner has co-written and stars in what's being billed as the first gay romantic comedy ever released by a major film studio, and also the first to feature an all-LGBTQ principal cast. It's called Bros.
I went to the screening with my husband, and halfway through, we had this moment where we looked at each other, recognizing that this was the first time we had seen ourselves represented, two gay men fronting a romantic comedy on the big screen.
Yeah, and what's amazing is that our priority when we wrote the movie was to make a hilarious movie.
He told me he likes country music and his favorite singer is Garth Brooks. What kind of gay man says his favorite singer is Garth Brooks? That scares me.
The movie follows Eichner's character, Bobby, as he stumbles towards a relationship with love interest Aaron, played by Luke McFarlane.
Great, whatever, whenever.
Cool, whatever, whenever. GIF of Michael Scott dancing. It's good.
Office gif? This person isn't gay.
You may recognize McFarlane. He's played the leading straight man on a bunch of Hallmark movies.
Stop swatting, you're gonna kill it.
Why do you think it's taken this long for a movie like this, two gay men in a romantic comedy, finally being on the big screen?
Well, the real answer to that is that the world, including Hollywood, has been very homophobic. And it's a complicated topic because in some ways, Hollywood has often led the charge when it came to LGBTQ issues and representation. And yet, underneath it all, I think there was always a fear that the quote-unquote mainstream audience wasn't necessarily ready for this type of movie. And I think because of that, a lot of our stories weren't told.
My mom died when I was in college.
While much of the film is fictional, Bros allowed Eichner to get personal.
For me to be an effective writer, a good artist, I needed to be able to be honest. It's all about honesty.
I was always too gay, or I was too niche, or, I made people uncomfortable. And I'm telling you, enough people tell you things like that, no matter how confident you are, when you're alone at night, you start to think that maybe they're right.
I love that monologue because I feel like it summed up the message and maybe your goal with the movie. You presented this relationship in all of its grittiness, not hiding behind anything.
That monologue on the beach was inspired by real experiences.
For example, in 2006, this was 5 years before his breakthrough comedy game show, Billy on the Street,
You're saying things that I would never have had the courage to say. You're
damn right I am!
Eichner says his manager brought talent agents to see one of his live comedy shows.
And asked me if I could make the show less gay that month. There were all kinds of overt and less overt ways that people were telling me, you're really talented, but we're not sure what to do with you. It was all this kind of like coded language, like, you're too smart, someone once said. I was like, you can be too smart? I didn't know that was a thing.
I've been met with, always being told that we're taking a chance, We don't really know how the audience is gonna respond. We don't know how the studio is gonna respond.
We've got Deborah Messing's agent on the Zoom. It's urgent. Deborah's worried that she's on the verge of being canceled. She said in an interview that she was the Viola Davis of Tufts, and people are mad.
The actor known as Miss Lawrence is also an LGBTQ activist.
What's it like to work on a production where everybody is free to be themselves? Not just free, but celebrated for that.
It's very rewarding. It's exciting. This is probably the first time we have ever seen that, where you have people in front and behind the lens representing every letter of the LGBTQ community.
Eichner underscored that when I visited the set last November.
Of the people here, how many are part of the LGBTQ community?
I think there might be a few people that have one or two lines that aren't, but I didn't want to completely erase straight people from the narrative the way they've erased me for thousands of years, because I'm trying to be bigger than that.
And Billy Eichner points out that Bros, while a comedy, does parody political issues.
We need new ideas for what goes in the final wing, and we need them now. Go.
What if the final exhibit was a recreation of a queer wedding?
I like that.
Okay, that I don't hate.
Here we are now, too, with the Supreme Court. There is concern that gay marriage could be reversed. What do you say to those who want to take that right away?
What do I say to people who want to take the right to get married away?
That's fit for television.
Right. I would say that they are completely backwards. And Bros is one example of this culturally. But we are never, ever going backwards. We will be living our lives the way we want to live them. we're going to have equal protection under the law and keep fighting for it. We're going to do with our bodies whatever the hell we want to do with our bodies, and that we've existed since the beginning of time. As long as there has been human civilization, there has been LGBTQ people, and that is going to continue.
Now you want to be on my big blanket? I gotta be aggressive. Oh, there you are.
Hey,
what's going on? I'm over your blanket.
And the latest chapter is now unfolding on the silver screen.
More from Jonathan Vigliotti and Billy Eichner coming up in just a few minutes. But first, a century-old celebration of the boll weevil. Enterprise, Alabama has a history of adversity, ingenuity, and resilience, brought on by the boll weevil. Here's Conor Knighton with a postcard.
In the center of Enterprise, Alabama, there's an intersection honoring an insect.
We are one of the few cities in the world that where you have in the middle of town a pest that's standing up on a pedestal.
William E. Cooper is the mayor of Enterprise.
Enterprise is a small town with a big heart.
But more than a century ago, a small creature, the boll weevil, nearly destroyed this town. It came for the cotton.
The boll weevil was a pest that was bad, and it just destroyed whatever was in its path. If you think the locust plagues in the Bible, you know.
Attorney and local historian Dale Marsh's grandfather owned a cotton farm in Enterprise in the early 1900s. By the time the invasive insect got to town, the tale of the pest that feeds on cotton seeds was already national news. The head of the USDA had deemed it a wave of evil.
The boll weevil's destruction didn't just affect the farmers. If the farmer had no money from his cotton crop, he had no money to pay back the bank or the merchant. So everybody was worried about what was going to happen.
What happened was the farmers pivoted to peanuts.
100 years ago, what would people have been growing in this field?
Been growing cotton right here.
And then the boll weevil changed all that?
Changed every bit of it.
William Birdsong owns a peanut farm near Enterprise.
The majority of the ones that are grown here are going to go into like M&M bars, candy bars, Snickers.
Oh, so if I'm eating a peanut M&M, it might have come from this field?
That's exactly right, or Jif peanut butter.
Today, Alabama is known for its peanuts. Alabama's Tuskegee Institute was once home to the most famous peanut promoter of all time.
George Washington Carver was very crucial to the success of the peanut because he led to the development and the introduction of many uses of peanuts, which obviously increases the demand and the need of all these peanuts that farmers would grow.
But back in 1915, nobody had ever planted peanuts here. It was only when the weevil wiped out the cotton crop that the Enterprise farmers tried something new.
That's the reason why that there's a statue in Enterprise to the boll weevil. It's very tongue-in-cheek, and so it's like, if it hadn't been for you, boll weevil, you caused us to be resilient and look for other means to try to survive and make a living.
In 1919, the town put up a monument to celebrate their agricultural prosperity. Decades later, a weevil was put on top, then taken off, then put back on. It used to be a popular prank to mess with it.
It has been taken, and we will find it somewhere out on the side of the highway or whatever.
But it's no longer the only weevil statue in town. Meet Mayor Weevil, Officer Weevil. There are weevils in front of the health clinic, and the ale house, and the local real estate office. Everywhere from the pharmacy, to the farmer's market, to the funeral home, there's been an infestation, created as a way to attract attention to local businesses.
A giant pest in front of a restaurant would not be the first marketing idea you might think of.
No, it definitely would not, but it seems to work.
Yeah, and does it? Does it? You feel like this drives people in?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Kids are climbing on it, taking pictures all the time. It's great.
The boll weevil continues to bring prosperity to Enterprise. There's the Weevil Nut Company, Boll Weevil Lanes. The Boll Weevil Soap Company sells unboll weavable lotion. From the CrossFit gym's Swole Weevil to the community college's Bo the Weevil mascot.
You might be the last living boll weevil left in this town, right? It seems like most of your brothers and sisters all got kicked out.
The pest is baked into the fabric of the local community. Even a national chain has played along.
1, 2, 3.
I'm loving it? Ronald McWeevil is one of the latest stops on Weevil Way. 9-year-old Amina Roston was spending her afternoon seeing them all.
I think it's kind of cool too because they ruined our crops, but it also makes us discover new things.
You hear that sentiment a lot in Enterprise. It's not actually about the insect. It's about what it represents.
The lesson of the boll weevil is that when adversity comes your way, don't quit.
As we look at it now, it was just something that made us move in another direction in a better way.
Whether you're an accountant, firefighter, mechanic, teacher, whatever this is, we all have weevils in our own lives. But they make us stronger. It's like the souvenir t-shirt says, "Fear no weevil." Celebrate it.
It might be silly if you don't know the story, but if you know the story, you know, it's a beautiful story.
I don't think there has been an openly gay male actor to ever win an acting Oscar in either acting category, ever.
After the break, more with actor and comedian Billy Eichner. Stay with us. Welcome back. As promised, here's more from Jonathan Vigliotti and Billy Eichner.
How did you come up with this name?
I actually thought of the title Bros even before most of the script was written. I just thought on one level, it's ironic, obviously. You know, the bro is the very conventional term for a certain type of like alpha, jock, straight guy, right? So it was ironic. We're doing a gay rom-com with an all openly LGBTQ cast, and I liked the idea that it was called Bros. It felt funny to me and sardonic. At the same time, it also started to make a lot of sense in terms of the specific story, because even though Bros is a comedy first and foremost, we do have some points that we're making about men in general, straight men and gay men, who I think deal with, especially in a romantic relationship, a lot of issues around vulnerability and how much to open yourself up to the other person, right? That's something I think straight men deal with even when they're with women who we are taught, at least conventionally, are more open to vulnerability and really admire vulnerability. Two men together, this is what I'm saying. This is why it can be a little different.
You go into casting. This is the first major studio film where all of the roles, gay and straight, played by actors who are members of the LGBTQ community.
Right.
Intentional?
100%. Yeah, because this is the first gay rom-com ever made by a major studio. And for me personally, knowing that I wrote it as a vehicle for myself, that the studio was giving me this huge opportunity, I have been an openly gay actor and comedian for over 20 years, since I got to New York City after I graduated Northwestern. It was a very, very different environment. The comedy world, especially, which I came up in, was so alpha, straight male dominated.
I feel like it still is.
And often still is, you know, and we still see stand-up comedians who think like they have every right to tear apart the LGBT community as part of their act, right? That they're entitled to do that. And you can imagine over 20 years ago, let alone before that, and the guys who came up before me, right? The actors and comedians, that was a very tricky road to navigate. And I'm very proud that I always was openly gay, and I understand I had many friends who chose not to be at the time, and that was their decision. For me, I always wanted to be really successful, but it meant a lot to me to be able to do it on my own terms. I wasn't gonna hide.
Was there any scene that didn't make the final cut because it was considered going too far?
No, if something didn't make the final cut, it was just because it wasn't up to our standards in terms of how funny it was. We really wanted to make a hilarious movie. There was no time in this movie for anything that didn't make the audience laugh out loud. We didn't want the audience, you know, you get a lot of dramedies these days, you know, you see a lot of shows that are nominated for Best Comedy and you're like, comedy? That's a comedy? Okay. And those shows are great, you know, but they're not making you laugh out loud. And so anytime we cut something, it was because it wasn't making people laugh enough. But nothing to do with, oh, this is gonna scare people off or straight people won't get this. This is a movie for smart people, straight, gay. This is a movie for sophisticated people. Bros is an R-rated gay rom-com. You know what you're getting into. Take it or leave it, but we weren't gonna water it down because that would make for a movie that wasn't as effective.
I imagine you have a few thoughts on this. So in other movies where gay roles are played by straight actors, how have you received those storylines?
Some of those movies are excellent. Some of those performances are fantastic. I mean, no one is going to argue with the fact that Sean Penn is brilliant in Milk, or that Heath Ledger is brilliant in Brokeback Mountain, or that Philip Seymour Hoffman, R.I.P., was brilliant in Capote, and that list goes on and on and on and on. But when you look at the amount of mainstream, quote-unquote, popular films that centered around LGBTQ characters, which was rare in and of itself, right? So few of them had actual openly LGBTQ actors and actresses playing those roles, or behind the camera, or writing it, or directing it. And I don't think we should establish any sort of strict rules about who plays what role, because this is a creative process. That's what art is about, and art is supposed to be a liberating force. There should be no rules around art. That said, right now there's such an imbalance. And historically in Hollywood, on the rare occasions they told LGBTQ stories and made LGBTQ-centric movies, again, we just did not get to play our own roles. We didn't get to write about our own lives and have that supported by the industry. And so all I'm trying to say is we need to try to correct that imbalance a little bit, because we deserve those opportunities too. I don't think there has been an openly gay male actor to ever win an acting Oscar in either acting category, ever.
At what moment in your real life did you learn it was time to come out, live my truth?
I had a very unusual upbringing in a great way. I grew up in New York City with very liberal parents. My parents at different times in their single lives had lived in the West Village in the 60s and 70s. Now, I'm not saying it was their dream to give birth to a gay child. I mean, you know, I was born in 1978, you know, this is not now, you know.
Different time.
A different time. But they were so supportive and so encouraging. And I mean, I was obsessed with Madonna as a kid growing up in the 80s, as most gay boys were. And they took me to Madonna concerts, and you know, like, so they were so supportive. And also, we would go to Broadway shows, right? I loved theater as a kid, as did my parents, and we would go to Broadway shows in the 80s and the early 90s, and I would look around and you would see gay men. You know, being in New York, I wasn't isolated, and my parents didn't think it was weird at all. And so I entered the world with a very particular perspective on things where I didn't think being gay was a big deal at all. In fact, I always thought it was really cool. I'm not saying no one didn't, you know, people called me names in junior high school here and there. Yeah. It just didn't affect me. Even from that age, I always thought, that kid's an idiot. Like, he's not going anywhere. Like, I'm on track to, like, do something great. Like, I really believed in myself, and that's thanks to my parents.
You had this incredible support system.
I did, which a lot of kids don't have.
I'm Lee Cowan. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you right here next time on Here Comes the Sun.